evening, everybody, from Boise, Idaho. As you can tell, I'm not in our studio. I'm in a hotel room. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider. Thanks for being with us. I wish I could tell you why I'm in Boise, but I can't just yet. You'll have to give it a few weeks. Stay tuned, as they say. But I've been out here today working on a special project with Jordan, our photographer. We actually came out yesterday and have been working all day, and it's been really fascinating, disturbing, so many things. And in just a few weeks, I promise I can tell you more, because we've only done a small part of our investigation. There's more to do in the coming weeks. With that being said, we'll push that aside. I want to talk about a few things tonight. The latest on Lori Daybell. The prosecutor has responded to Lori's request for a new trial in a 16-page document. It's pretty interesting. We also have some Kohberger news as that trial gets closer and closer to us, and a fascinating interview that I hope you will stay tuned for. Monique Smith. She's been called the longest living Jane Doe. And after years of abuse and trafficking, she finally learned, after years and years, decades of living, that she wasn't who she thought she was or who she was told she was. And then went on this incredible journey, and has been on this incredible journey, to find out who she really is. We met at CrimeCon years ago, just kind of in passing in a hallway. I saw her, I grabbed her, I did a quick interview there on the spot, and I said, I need to talk to you more. And finally, that happened this week, and I hope you'll stay tuned for that interview. Lifetime actually did a movie just a few weeks ago about her story, and she's written a book called You Are the Ancestor. And it's just I think you'll find the interview really inspiring, and it will leave you with a lot of questions, as it did me. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about Lori Vallow, Daybell. You remember that last week we talked about her wanting a new trial. She filed a motion for a new trial, said that there were 5 reasons why she needed a new trial: prosecutorial misconduct, juror misconduct, improper exclusion of hearsay testimony, lack of impartiality by the court, issues with witnesses and what they said. Well, Trina Kay, the Maricopa County Deputy Prosecuting Attorney, has now responded in a 16-page document. Now, I'm not going to go through it all for you tonight. I'm going to go through the key points to kind of get you up to speed, just kind of give you the highlights. Basically, Trina Kay responded and said there was no juror misconduct. There was no prosecutorial misconduct. There was no improper exclusion of evidence. And the judge was not impartial. Let's start with the juror's statement. We've talked about this a few times. I'm not going to play the statement, but one of the jurors came out of the courtroom right after the verdict was announced, and seemed to imply that he was aware of Lori's prior convictions. When he said he was driving home from the court and he felt sorry for her, thinking she'd be spending the next 3 lives in prison. Trina Kay, that was the reason number 1 why Lori said, I deserve a new trial, because the jurors were not supposed to know about her previous convictions. Fair point, because they weren't. However, Trina Kay responded and said that wasn't the only statement the juror made that day. 1, the juror was ambushed with media. They referenced video from other media outlets saying that the cameras were running up to them. They were likely confused, caught off guard. Understandable. But then she said this juror also was asked, and I was there in the scrum when this happened, were any of you folks aware that this woman had already been convicted of 3 homicides? And juror 15 responded, no, I did not. Meaning he didn't know. He goes on to say that this juror did another interview where he was asked repeatedly and stated repeatedly that when he was in the jury room, he started Googling Lori Vallow. He spoke with Hidden True Crime, the Hidden True Crime podcast, and said that when he was in that room, that's when he started to Google Lori Vallow and was asked. And so it sounds like before he even walked outside, the juror had Googled it and knew. Basically, Trina Kay says, no juror misconduct there. He's fine. That reason should be dismissed. Daybell also raised concerns and was upset that statements that Tylee made and Alex Cox, her brother, made to police right after Charles Vallow was shot were not admitted into court. They weren't admitted because they were hearsay, because those 2 were not alive to authenticate that they said those words. They couldn't take the stand as witnesses. Trina Kay wrote There's no exception that permits their admission. The defendant never established a foundation that any statements made by Alex or Tylee hours after the shooting were admissible under any of the Arizona rules of evidence. The testimony of Alex Cox and Tylee Ryan were appropriately precluded or excluded as hearsay. Statement number 2, knocked out. Or responded to. Trina K then responded to allegations that she committed a discovery violation by not turning over a hard drive with Vallow, Charles Vallow's cell phone info, to the defense until the middle of the trial. Remember, that was an issue that came up. Lori's team couldn't get into to evaluate the data, and it went back and forth, and ultimately, Trina K noted that the judge, Boreski, told Lori, do you want a continuance? We can delay your trial if you need more time to evaluate all this evidence. And Lori said no. Quote, the defendant advised she wanted to proceed with trial and said, instead of seeking a continuance, to allow her expert time to review the victim's cell phone. Lori could have had more time to do that, but she didn't choose to, according to Trina K. Not only that, Trina K says that evidence, the issue that was discussed with the cell phone and Charles Vallow and everything, that was disclosed to her team in January of 2024, more than a year before the trial started. So the issue of timing, Trina K says, isn't an issue. There was no, issue with the evidence. Daybell accused Trina K of committing prosecutorial misconduct by giving false statements during her closing argument. K responded to Daybell and said, excuse me, I gotta wipe my nose. I don't have a tissue nearby. I'll wash my hands, I promise. K responded that Daybell, quote, intentionally mischaracterized one sentence from her entire closing argument. The state I'm quoting here, the state made argument to the jury regarding the defendant's demeanor on the day of the shooting. The witness described the defendant as chatty, nonchalant, and unaffected by her brother allegedly being struck with a baseball bat, her husband lying dead in the house, and her children no longer having a father. Trina K stressed Lori was nonchalant during all of this. The defendant's demeanor with law enforcement the day of the murder was in complete opposition to the defendant's demeanor during opening statements, when she was crying in front of the jury. So, Trina K responds to that allegation from Lori. Another reason that Daybell said that she deserved the new trial was because Boreski struck two of her proposed witnesses, me and Brandon Boudreau. Do you remember that this was an issue in the beginning of the trial, that Lori wanted to call me as a witness? Boreski, I had my attorney go up and say that I shouldn't be a witness. I prepared a document. Boreski told Lori, I'm going to strike me from the witness list, but if it comes up later in the trial that there is a valid reason why Nate Eaton needs to testify, I will reconsider it. Same with Brandon Boudreau. He was excluded from the list without prejudice, meaning if Lori Vallow Daybell made a valid argument that she should be called to testify, the judge would consider it. Well, Lori ended up not calling any witnesses, and our names were never brought up again until this motion, when Lori's saying that the judge unfairly excluded us from the lists. As far as an issue that Daybell raised concerning Boreski making being an impartial judge because he made a statement when she was questioning someone about Nephi and translated beings, K responds, the defendant argues that one comment by the judge during a 2-week trial somehow rises to the level that the judge was biased or prejudiced. Defendant has not shown any level that she was denied a fair trial because of an impartial judge. So that is a brief 3-minute synopsis of Lori's filing, the response to Lori's filing from Trina K. The judge, I expect, will rule on this. He might hear an oral argument. It's up to him. What we do know is that next week on the 14th, there is a pre-trial hearing before the trial starts. I just can't believe it. We're already to trial number 2. Trial number 4, really. Trial number 2 in Arizona. So we'll see if the judge responds in writing to her request, denying it or approving it. If he approves it, we'll obviously have one more trial. I don't personally expect that, but I could be wrong, and I'll tell you if I'm wrong. And then the hearing set for next week, we'll discuss maybe some other motions. So we will have that for you next week on the 14th, next Wednesday. It won't be live. The judge has put in a delay. As soon as we can get the video from our friends in Phoenix, we will have that for you. And then we will do a Courtroom Insider Wednesday, next Wednesday, not Thursday. So join me next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Mountain Time, and we will have Courtroom Insider. Let's talk Kohberger for a second. The latest news in Brian Kohberger case, I posted on my Facebook page earlier today, is that the judge is allowing his family to come into the trial. They can stay as long as they want. They can come one day, the whole day, the whole time. It's up to them. Even though they might be called as witnesses. You know that this has been an issue with witnesses, that if you're on the witness list, you're not supposed to be in the courtroom until you testify, because they don't want your testimony to be tainted by other witnesses. Well, the judge has said that they will be allowed in. They can be in there even if they do have to testify. That's basically a summary of a 3-page order allowing them in. Also, he filed another order saying that there had been an earlier hearing Monday, which was sealed to the public to address Kohberger's mental health evaluation. The prosecutors are not allowed to conduct personality testing, but it sounds like there will be quite a bit of discussion during this trial about Kohberger's personality and mental health. The defense has already raised up an issue that he's autistic and that should have got the death penalty struck because he's on the autism spectrum. The judge denied that, and there have been many motions filed about his mental health. That trial is set to go in about 3 months. So here in Boise, where I'm at, I have Boise memories everywhere I go of the Daybell trials and soon to be the Kohberger trial. Okay, with that, I want to jump into our interview with Monique Smith. She spent decades searching for her real identity and finally learned it after years of being abused and trafficked. And now she is advocating for people all over the world who are in similar situations. As I mentioned, it's an inspiring story. Monique told me that when we show it now, maybe not tonight, but maybe tomorrow or the next day, she's going to go in the comments and she's going to respond and she's going to try to help people. She's going to answer questions. So if you have questions or comments during this interview, put them in the comments, and she might respond to you in the coming days herself, because she is that passionate about it. She's now a mother of 4, and she has just had quite a remarkable story. I don't want to say much more. I want her to tell it. So here's my interview with Monique Smith. All right, Monique, so good to see you. It's been a few years since we met at CrimeCon, and you recently, a movie came out on Lifetime about your life. Let's just, I guess, start from the beginning. For those people that aren't familiar with your story, tell me it. Let's go back to the start.
Okay, so at the assumed age of 28, I discovered a tragic incident that had happened in my life, that my identity wasn't my identity. So in the correct mindset, I just assumed that I had very horrible family members. And you hear the stories all the time. So unfortunately, the more I dove into what had actually happened, I was actually abducted at the age of 1 in 1968 and brought to Baltimore, Maryland from New York. And I did not discover this until, again, I was assumed age of 28. And it was so alarming to me that every family member, friend, associate was in denial. Like, they knew and never disclosed the information ever. So they watched me go through horrific child abuse, mental, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, and no one did anything. Absolutely nothing.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so there's a lot there. You're abducted at age 1. Who abducted you?
So it was a lady who I just assumed, when they say hurt people, but I never knew anything about her childhood, even though I was raised by her. And I just couldn't imagine. But this woman literally stole me from my family.
Did she know you guys?
So I'm still, a lot of things are still unfolding because this is relatively new. This was I've been missing for over 50 years, but I've been in the works of discovering this for the last 20, and some things are just coming to light. And I don't even know what triggered her to do such a thing. other
Right.
than the fact that, she could not have kids. She never had her own children.
So you think she may have wanted a daughter, a child?
That's hard for me to believe because of the amount of abuse. And like I got beat every day. I mean, if it rained, I got beat twice. And just for no reason. It would just be random attacks of any kind. And so I don't even understand. So there were no tea parties, no mommy and me sessions, no muffin with moms, no none of that. It was just I was her personal, private, basically her slave. I cleaned her room, I cleaned the house, I cleaned around her. I started working at the age of 9, and I have receipts to prove it from the Department of Social Services. So things weren't automated where you file your taxes and you use too many Social Security numbers and they ping your tax and stop your process. None of that was going on in the 60s and 70s. And so I remember the places that I worked, the hotels that I worked in, the office buildings that I worked at night, cleaning off desktops and, dumping trash from 9, 10, 11.
Oh my gosh. So she moves you to Baltimore at age 1,
Yes,
and you live this horrific childhood. Were you
yes.
like going to school every day, like public schools?
Yes, yeah, I did. I went to all of Baltimore City public schools and actually graduated in 1984. And that was one of the key pieces that helped me pull my story together. Is because when I never had any documentation, I've never saw a birth certificate or a passport. And
Mm.
I said, oh, wait a minute, how could I move around? How could I get, enrolled in school? So I contacted every municipal that I could imagine. I'm talking, Department of Social Service, Department of Education, baptismal papers. And the dates started coming in, and there was so many inconsistencies, with the documents. The dates were 1966, 65, 67. My last name was, Rodriguez. It said I was Hispanic. So, my mindset, I was like right at the edge. It never tumbled over, but I was right at the edge of feeling like I was going to be insane. Like my
I can't,
whole world just started spinning around me. Everything that I heard being abused, when they say they're going to kill you if you say anything, you're going to die. To wake up as a child and think that was the day that you were going to die is one of the most horrifying things to endure as a child. In a time that you're supposed to be really enjoying your life under care. And, at an early age, I would wake up in fear that that would be the day that I would die.
mm, oh
Yeah,
my.
it's pretty
Did this
bad.
woman have other kids?
No, there was only myself.
Just you. And did she have a partner?
No, so she didn't get a partner until later in life. And I think I was around 8 years of age when she met this gentleman, and he assumed that she had given birth to me, that she was my bio mom. So,
Hmm.
they were trying to, have a child together and, build this wonderful family. He was going to try to adopt me as his own, and he never knew. And until years later, when they were divorced, I'm talking 15, we ran into each other and he told me what he learned later, that he did not know anything about what had transpired with me during the course of their marriage.
Mm. So
Yeah.
you're calling her mom,
Yeah.
and she's introducing you as your daughter, enrolling you in, as her daughter, enrolling you in school. It comes time to graduate, and you're trying to gather documentation to advance your life. Well, I
Yes.
guess she was able to enroll you in school without birth certificates, without any social security card, things like that. She somehow it worked.
Back in the day, it wasn't as what the requirements weren't the
Yeah,
same. So I think it was more of the, oh, go ahead and enroll her, bring it back tomorrow. All the kids are in class now. Let's get her going. It's only kindergarten. But then after kindergarten, you goes to middle school and you goes to high school. So they just roll your paperwork, your enrollment process
right,
over and transfer it to the next school.
right.
And when you look at it, even her name, so she became an alias. Like, so she had four different names, four different dates of birth, two different origins of where she was, born at. And again, those things weren't discovered to me until, like I said, I was in my 30s at this stage once more additional paperwork came in.
Wow. So what'd you do after you graduated high school?
Unfortunately, I confronted her and said, hey, I'm 18, I got a high school diploma, I'm working, I need to do different things. And that day I got another beat down, like of my life. Like I literally, I don't want to go into details, but it was a horrible experience. And sure enough, I ran away.
Hmm.
And not thinking, with no protection, really didn't have any guidance growing up, no support. I went to Florida and fell into the wrong hands. And the next thing I know, I was on the streets, what we call as a survivor, survival sex. But then I was under the directive of a madam because I had met this woman who just was gonna, take me under her wing and, you shouldn't be out here alone. If you were my daughter, I want someone to help you. And it was a horrible experience. So I'm like, okay, here it is. I escaped this horrific lifestyle to fall in the hands and I'm come like, God, I know I'm meant for so much more. It's got to be something, there's something for me. And I
Hmm.
didn't know what it was, but I knew there had to be something for me.
And so
And
was
it
this woman trafficking you?
Yes, yes. And unfortunately, I'm trying to get emotional now, but it's going to happen. Unfortunately, I befriended this woman. She was everything that this other woman wasn't. She was nurturing in a conversation and happened relatively fast. And, oh, you're so attractive. You're going to get off the bus. I see this happen to these young girls all the time. And, they're going to snatch you up and you're going to be out here and they're going to beat you down. And so that fear, and I'm thinking this is a safe space. And sure enough, she takes me to her house and it was almost a brothel. It was almost like the place was filthy. I woke up the next day. She was drunk beyond measure. Like I'd seen people get drunk before. And this woman was drunk. And then the threats came in. She had taken my money. She had indicated that I was going to work immediately, like that same day, go to work out the streets, and then bring all the money back with her. And I just left that environment because
Hmm.
at the age of 18, I was working and I had to bring my paycheck back every single day. I mean, I'm sorry, every single week, every single time. And she would just give me enough bus fare to get back to work. And this is the exact same thing that this woman did. She would just give me just enough money to get out, get donned up for the streets and work.
Oh my. So
Yeah.
how long were you in Florida?
I was in it, I was too long. It was a couple of years. It was a couple of years. And I'm not gonna say I had to escape in a manner that was life threatening. And it was to me, it was my life or his life at the time. So
Right.
I had to make a choice. But no one's life was taken. So that was a good part. But it was right at that brink that if I didn't get out right then and there, I may not be here having this conversation with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
What'd you do then?
Well, I came back to Baltimore, Maryland because it was familiarity. Like I just, felt comfortable. I graduated high school and, I knew one or two people. I had a relationship with my grandmother, whom I thought, would be a great opportunity in a safe space to go back to her. Unbeknownst to me, the minute that I got there and knocked on the door, her daughter, who was the one who abducted me. And I didn't know this at the time. I'm still assuming that this woman is my mother.
Hmm.
So when I arrived to my grandmother's house and I didn't tell her I was coming, I just showed back up. And it just kind of it all started all over again. Oh, you were out in the street, you couldn't survive, now you're back, think that again, it's going to start back over. Like we almost picked up where we left. Years had passed, and she was talking to me like we were going to pick back up where she left off. Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're what, mid 20s at that point?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was closer to like 23. I was closer to
Okay.
20. Yeah, I was close to 23. So it
Eh,
was just really hard. I think the most devastating part was too is that, I was sexually assaulted by too many people in her family. And one of the men was staying at the house with her mom. So, me moving back in, it was just like, and of course, I'm in the same situation, no place to go, absolutely no money. It's like, what do you do, in this kind of environment? And when people always say to victims, when they say, why did you didn't leave? Or, why did you stay if it was so bad? Each case is different. I've learned because of the advocacy work that I've been doing over the last 20 years. You're paralyzed. You're going through a thought process. You're looking for like your next move if you can move. So that my choice at the time was, I'm in Baltimore City. Do I want to go live on the streets?
Right. Yeah,
So
if you don't have money, if you don't have resources,
right,
where are you going to go and how are you going to get there?
right. And I didn't want to continue what I was doing in Florida.
Right.
That was to me, I left it. I walked into that there, I walked out of there and it should have stayed there. So yeah, did it cross my mind to do that once I got back? Yes, it did. But fortunately for me, I was able to find employment and that was a whole nother thing. So I was basically scaving and flying under the radar for years because every job requires documents. They require a birth certificate. And I'm sitting here praying every day, like, no, they're not gonna ask. They're not gonna ask. Well, when they do inquire, I can say, well, I filed, it's in the mail, I moved and I came back, and I got to do a change of address. So I played the game and lived under this fake identity. I'm still, as I'm speaking to you, you're calling me Monique Smith. That is the name that this woman gave me.
The
And
woman
I
that
can't,
abducted you.
yes, it's not my bio name. Nope, that my biological mother gave me. Now,
And let's remind everybody that this is back before there were like accessible DNA tests that you could do in the mail, before the internet, before, you could Google search things. Uh,
exactly.
so what you're flying under the radar doing these jobs. At what point did you think there's got to be more to my life? Like this isn't adding up, that this isn't my mom. How did that all come together?
So by this time, I'm employed and I'm working at the largest institution known in this country, John Hopkins. And I'm a mother of two. You don't need to have a birth certificate to buy a home. So I bought a house, and my son, by the time I'm on my second home, he indicates that oh, he's top in his notch of Taekwondo, and he has a chance to go to a temple, Shaolin temple in another country. And I'm like, I can't even prove my kid is my kid. So unbeknownst to me, I'm actually falsifying my kid's birth certificate with this fake name. I didn't even know at that time. But what drove me to it was I confronted her again saying, hey, where's my paperwork? I got kids now. Give me something, give me something. And that's when so I got to go back. That's when the paperwork was, looked into. Is that once I realized that I couldn't even prove really like wholeheartedly that my children were my children. And that's bizarre.
That's impressive though, Monique, to go from the streets of Florida, moving back to the abuser's home to the point where you get a job at John Hopkins and you have a home, your second home that you're buying, and two
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. I
That
was desperate. I was a little kind of desperate because all my friends were going to college and everything I would have wanted to go to college for required you to be licensed, bonded. I knew they were going to ask for certain paperwork. So, but you didn't have to have that with opening a bank account and, buying a home. Now it's a little bit different. But it was really, really easy for me to do. So I kind of had to I always had to replace the things that I couldn't do with things that I could do.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
confront her and say, I need this stuff. And does she flat out say, I don't have it. I'm not your mom? How did that back and forth go?
So the conversation went, hello, I'm finding out some weird things about, this process, who am I? Where's my paperwork? And she just went she just went in on me like she had never gone in before. I did this for you and I did that for you and I did this for you. And she just went in and she said, you know what? I'm sick of addressing this BS with you. And I'm gonna go to my grave before you learn anything.
Mm.
So then and there, I just kind of went on a multi-state search. Like you said, the DNA is out. So I put it in ancestors.com, 23andMe. I know you know what NamUs is. NamUs is a national organization that takes the DNA from bodies that they find in abandoned homes, under park benches, crime scenes where nobody wants to be associated with the individual. And it's a portal. And I just started doing any and everything. And I contacted the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And they were like, what? I said, I'm a missing kid. And it was like, ma'am, we don't understand what you're saying. I said, well, you find children. And I think this lady who raised me stole me from somewhere. Like all the paperwork is bizarre. And I'm hearing these comments from her family members like, you're not my niece anyway, and she's not your mother anyway. And something's going on. It took them 2 years. But I'm actually missing child number 1201298 on a national registry of missing and exploited children. So to me, I was making grounds, but I wasn't getting anywhere because I kept searching for Monique Smith. Monique Smith. I'm all over New York and Chicago. I'm all over the place. Filling out applications, trying to get for Monique Smith. It didn't dawn on me until my mid-30s that I was looking for paperwork on a person that was a fake person. It was an alias. And it
I
just
can't even
didn't know.
imagine that. I can't even imagine like where you would start and who you would contact. And I mean, you don't know really who you are, like, on paper, on documents. So
On
where did
document.
that search lead?
Well, it led me to after the National Center of Missing Exploited Children. I, did the DNA. There were no hits that whatsoever. Two things that the National Center of Missing Exploited Children does, as well as another agency, is that they take your information, obviously, and they store it in a database. And then on the anniversary of you submitting the information, any loved one that you're looking for, they put it in a portal. So mine would have been African American, female, age, range of 1, 2, 3 at the time, and still there was no pain whatsoever. So I left no stone unturned. So I started going to the Salvation Army, who's been around since the early 1800s, who specializes in homeless people, human trafficking, and missing children. And they worked with me for an extended period of time, and they said, you know, you're Jane Doe, you're a living Jane Doe, and that's where the name came from. The longest living Jane Doe um, was coined by them for me, and it was just really sad. And I have a letter from them saying that you would never be identified.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that was in the 80s, like 1986. Yeah, it was. I mean, not 86. I'm sorry, in 1986. It was just horrible to know that I had went through every single program, adoption agencies, foster care, the FBI. The FBI even told me that they were like, "How do we know you're not an illegal immigrant trying to obtain, a new identity?" The CIA said, "How do we know that you're not a criminal trying to start a new life over?" Like, so doors were shutting in my face, and I wasn't disappointed or mad. It was just it made sense because I was like that very first case that
Right.
anyone had heard of. Just like with the National Center for Exploited Children, you normally get a loved one that's asking for help to find, but not me. And I'm like, listen, all missing kids aren't dead. There's a family out there somewhere that's looking for a baby girl, and it's me. I just said I'm missing, but I'm all grown up now. Like I'm all grown up, so it kind of opened the eyes because it's only been maybe like one other case other than my case that this happened around. And so it was starting to bring awareness to detectives. They were opening up cold cases, other cases, the families who had stopped searching started searching when they heard my story. So it came about. It was a beautiful outcome. But like I said, me trying to survive, thinking that at one point that my kids were going to be taken from me. I was waiting for somebody in that family to come up with some falsification of something to say, and produce it, because that's how they got me, and actually take my children from me. And
Ugh.
that's when I decided to really elevate my voice, advocate for myself even stronger. And I wrote the book, and I started contacting more agencies, and I have like a journal, like this huge book. So whoever I spoke to, I wrote their names down, what the conversation was like, what the responses were, like this whole checklist. And then if they referred me to someone else, I made sure that I contacted and reached out to that individual agency. And it was just repeatedly ripping off this band-aid, to tell my story. And it was helping so many other people,
Mm.
people that were passionate about, closing the cold cases, the other families who had stopped searching for their loved ones to hear my story. And even if their outcome would have been to have a body bag, the closure meant so much to them just to hear my story and what we were going through. So it was that part
Having
was the great side.
right, having an answer. So, I mean, in a way, you're living with all sorts of emotions, fear, and then also hope. I would think that you'll find that family. And as you've spoken out and wrote the book and gone to CrimeCon and now the Lifetime movie that aired a few weeks ago, has there been any progress as far as finding your original parents, your biological parents?
Yeah, so I was very, very excited. So HBO did a documentary. It's called Black and Missing. It's a disparity study on, when African Americans go missing, what type of resources are available, and it's really down to zero. Like you have almost 600 to 800,000 people reported missing annually, and over 40% of those are people of color. But just to get some closure and some processes done, it's still a very difficult thing. It's a really difficult thing. I just lost my train of thought, so I apologize
That's okay.
when I was thinking about the work. But yeah, what's moving the needle forward for me is just to be able to use my story. This is my assignment, and it's really been hard for me. CC Moore with Dateline News, she got involved and they took the DNA from NamUs, the National Center Mixes for the Children, 23andMe, and Ancestry.com, and they did this little cocktail thing. And they actually went back um, and found my great great grandparents to my grandparents down to my parents. Yeah, so it was an incredible, it was a shocker. The state police here in Maryland, the Maryland State Human Trafficking Task Force was very, very, very instrumental. Debbie Fowler, Detective Fowler, really worked with CC Moore and her DNA detectives, and they dug deep and they built this whole ancestral tree. But unfortunately, everyone had passed. So, the
Mm.
great great grandparents, the grandparents, and my parents were gone. And I was fortunate enough to meet a sister, and it wound up being seven. So altogether, there were seven
Seven
sisters,
siblings.
seven siblings alive, seven, and I call us the seven surviving sisters. But there were more children, but they since passed.
So seven, all women, all girls, seven sisters.
All girls, over 50, over 50. That's why I call this the seven surviving sisters. Yeah.
And did the same, what happened to them? I mean, were they all raised together, the other six, or do you know?
No, yeah. So from my understanding, I can't reveal or share their personal lives, but
Right.
I know when we all met together, my mom did pass at the age of 34. She
Oh,
died of a heroin overdose. And what I feel is she was a teenage mom, throwaway mom. She had no sisters and brothers. Our grandparents had passed away. So here you have this woman giving birth at 16, pregnant at 15, giving birth at 16, she had seven kids and died at 34 of a heroin overdose. To me, I feel like being as vulnerable as she was, when heroin came to Harlem, it was just what we call postpartum depression. She had to be going through that, by herself because they were all together. My oldest sister said to me when I met her, one day you were there and one day you weren't. And she was at the time like maybe 14 or 15 or so. So the other young siblings didn't even remember me, but they all kind of, went to different friends, family members, because they were minors. They
Right.
were all when she passed away. Yeah.
What about the woman who raised you?
She 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 died at the age of 77. She
Mm.
died the very year that I found my family. The very year that I reconnected with my family. And she knew, she heard, as they say, heard through the grapevine, that I reconnected with my family. And so she took what actually transpired at that time. That, did she run into the house and see these kids and grab one? People were assuming, oh, your mother was on drugs. And first of all, to me, and this is again my personal perspective, is that you don't have 7 kids that you're taking care of all 7 kids and you just randomly want to give up.
Hmm.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. There was, I don't, I can put my spirit at ease to say there was no financial transaction, there was no drug transaction. I was raised by a very evil, wicked woman who saw someone who was very vulnerable, and she took advantage of this woman's situation because she didn't. I would have been the age of 8 when my bio mother died. So to me,
Wow.
this woman had plenty of time to have a conversation with me like, oh, well, I couldn't have kids and we met and we had tea and she offered me one. Never. She took that to her grave because she knew what she did. Her role was wrong.
Right. Did you ever have final words with her before her death, or had you kind of closed that door and moved on?
I closed it the minute that she said I would take it to my grave. And that would have been probably in 2009. I remember it was in 2009 that when she said that. And the reason why I wrote the book is because it was my small voice trying to tell the masses that all missing children are dead. I know I'm missing. There's a family out there and what this woman did, but I need the world to help me. And so I could have told my story and put in a safe deposit box for my children, but I feel like how do I help elevate humanity with hope because I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm alive, I'm a mother, and it meant so much for me to give my real legacy, my real identity to my children, and that's why I did the book, and it's been very successful. Like I said, a Lifetime picked it up and they did a 2-hour adaptation of the book. I am the ancestor. I am the ancestor. And I was adamant about all the names that you wanted to give me. At the end of the day, no name matters. It's just that the role that you play. I'm living the story that I told.
I Am the Ancestor is the name of the book. And what was the name of the Lifetime movie? Same?
Not my family, the Monique Smith story.
Not My Family. Monique, did you ever think about changing your name, giving yourself a new name?
Well, I was very fortunate that the local media here in Baltimore, Maryland, investigative reporter had heard the story before Lifetime. They had heard the story and they were fascinated. And they said, this doesn't make sense that no one has ever helped you. And I said, well, they give me what they can until they can't go anymore. But, it's a big financial piece, it's an emotional piece. And he said, no, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. And sure, lo and behold, the municipals in New York with the help of CC Moore and those guys, actually had to find the birth certificate. So even though they had names, no one saw the birth because they didn't know what my name was. So they knew what my mother's name was, but they couldn't find my name.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, so my real name is actually Simboli Ruffin. Yeah, yeah. I'm a Ruffin, and I can't even use it. Like this is so wild. So I discovered in 2022 that is my real name, and I can't even use it. I'll literally have to petition the courts now to
Use
use
your real name.
my real name. Like,
Well,
yeah,
right, and you've probably done everything. You've done everything with Monica Smith, so why change it? Or you've done everything with Monique Smith, so why change it?
yeah, yeah. And even one of the outreach. So for the last 20 years, I've been doing street outreach, missing children, human trafficking. I champion for legislation, tougher legislation to actually happen, keep the awareness going. And it's called the Known as Monique Initiative because I'm known as Monique. So
Yeah.
trying to change it would be hard. Everyone said, "Oh, I love your name. It's Symboli or the Symboli or the Symboli. How do you pronounce that?" So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna stick with Monique.
Right.
And because I never knew what pronunciation my mother had for it.
Right. Do you ever
Yeah.
wonder, Monique, how many other girls and boys are in a circumstance like this right
You know,
now?
I could cry because before Lifetime did their story in HBO, but Lifetime just in the last week, if I could tell you how many emails and DMs that I'm getting from people who are saying, oh my gosh, your story is like mine. I don't look like the people around me. I don't sound like the people around me. I'm hearing these strange conversations. I think that, I was stolen. I think I was abducted. I think I'm missing. And it's so sad to think that there are thousands of kids. Maybe they were treated well. They had no reason to go and search. They weren't abused mentally, physically, sexually. Like they lived a good life. Parents were sending them to college. They're, on the will to receive, the full inheritance. Um, I believe it a lot. And some people just aren't interested in looking. They have the same right as foster care kids or kids that are adopted. But would you, if it tugged at your spirit and your soul long enough, would you go back and check?
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about working with HBO on Black and Missing and women and men of color. They don't seem to get the same media coverage as white people in many cases. And Gabby Petito's family has actually been active in talking about this. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's, not as much coverage when a person of color goes missing versus a white person?
My personal perspective, first of all, the Gabby Petito Foundation is amazing, and so are the parents. I love them both. Met them at CrimeCon. They do a phenomenal job, and they too have supported, people of color. I think this weekend past they just did the indigenous people that go missing and raised awareness on their behalf. Um, I just think I'm not going to say culturally. I believe back, growing up when kids were missing in the African American community, you were Big Mama. You was at your cousin's house, chilling on a couch for a couple of days. It was a bit different than, Caucasians. I just think, and they call it. There is a slang called white woman's syndrome. That when a white woman goes missing, the whole world comes out. Godivados, helicopters, scuba divers. Um, and I really can't put anything on it. We've done the studies. We just know that there's an imbalance. We know that the disparity study is way off. Um, and I'm not going to say it's there's nothing to joke about it, but I'm going to make this statement. I always think that Caucasian people have hobbies. So if you think about it, the vast majority of Caucasian, they have jet skis, they have boats, they have horses. So when the federal government calls out a search and say, "Oh my gosh, we have somebody missing," they just show up with the things that they already own. So they think about it. Let's be honest, like so, if they said someone is missing by the lake, so everyone's out. They grab their boat, grab their gear, grab their partners, and they get in their boats and they go. If it's in a wooded area, they grab their horses and their quads, and they volunteer. So in the African American community, inner city, or I'm not going to say in rural areas, when an African American person go missing, how many African American people are going to mount up on horses or mount up and load their boats? And so I'm playing this weird thing, and I probably shouldn't because it's really insensitive. But when I really think about it, and if it doesn't make sense to you, a thought process that would make sense to you, I honestly think that that's what happens. Their hobbies are things that drones for crying out loud. How long? Drones are really coming out about like now, but drones were out for forever. Sonar, radar for the water when they're checking to see whether or not a car went into a ravine. Who has that type of money or that type of equipment? And unfortunately, in the DMV area, when someone goes missing, there's only 3 scuba divers that actually volunteer from Virginia
Mm,
that comes out.
yeah.
So
For
yeah,
for those
so
watching, DMV is DC, Maryland, Virginia, and I lived in Virginia for 6 years. My wife's from there, so different in different areas for sure. Versus here in rural Idaho, you're right. People show up with their horses, their ATVs. They have they're there. They want to help. They want children to be
now
found.
African American, we do show up. Don't get me wrong, we do show up. We just don't have. We don't show up equipped
Yeah.
as our counterparties actually show up. So we do participate in the searches. We, do come out with the water bottles, the tables and set up and do the whole logistical, like, okay, here are the areas we're going to touch base on, work with the law enforcement. So we do show up, but what I'm saying is it just looks more involved with people who are bringing out their personal items. Yeah.
Monique, the name of the book is I'm the Ancestor. You talked about how you want your children to be your legacy. So, how are your kids?
Oh, they're amazing. So I have I have four amazing kids. I have my oldest daughter, two sons, and then my baby girl who's about to graduate from college. Both my boys served in the Marines. One did 4 years, the other one did 6 years. And it was challenging raising them, but I wanted to be open and transparent. I needed to do that quick separation at the minute that I knew what was happening. I had to start separating them slowly but surely from the family because they built a bond. Like they didn't know, I didn't know. So here it is. I'm exposing this woman as grandma. And I'm again thinking that I just had a mean mother, because I hear my friends in school like, oh, my mother's a oh yeah, my mother's a she took my phone. I got curfew. My mother's a and I'm like, yeah, me too, me too. So they're at an age now, 35 and 20, like they're getting the whole we understand, but they did have to go through that transition to in detachment. Like, well, they were so mean. Why'd you bring me around them? So I had to go through that process,
Yeah.
and I recommend that with every family, regardless of your circumstances, is to talk to your kids, about everything that's happening in your life. Be as open and transparent as possible.
Do you ever wonder, Monique, if, there's some sort of purpose in all of this for you?
I definitely know, and I know God gave me this assignment. I'm very proud of it. Being a pioneer, you don't want to be a little kid. You only wishes to grow up and say I'm a missing person. Like I've been ridiculed, I've been victim shamed. I have been charged extra to work with entities to help share my story because they felt it was unbelievable and they didn't want to be associated with it. So to push through, um, still the wounds of helping has been the assignment that I feel that God has given me, like to never give up hope. And when they say trust the process, it's more than trusting it. You gotta believe it. And I believe that when God first told me as a child that I was meant for so much more, that all I had to do is keep going for it. That other saying, use what you have to get what you want. Well, I had hope and I believed in it. And I didn't have money, but I had hope and I believed wholeheartedly. And that's why I poured into myself like a river. And look, I've been blessed with so many opportunities. And it's really weird to take on such an assignment. And I'm the only one, like when they say you're chosen, but again, even today it's a battle. It's a battle today.
What a story. What an incredible story, Monique. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, no, I'm grateful. I do want to tell people, well, I shouldn't say no, and I go yes. But listen, if you feel that you want something, go after it, and you don't do the pity party role. And my mom didn't help me, my family ain't there, my friend. I did it with no mother, no father, no sister, no brothers, no aunts, no like if you have to do it on your own and champion your life for you, do it. Do it and stand proud. So you go from, I did it by myself to I did it by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Monique, thank you. Huge thanks to Monique for sharing such an inspiring story. You can learn more about her and pick up her book, I Am the Ancestor, and I imagine we'll be hearing more from her in the coming days. She mentioned CrimeCon. That's where we met years ago. If you want to go to CrimeCon, there's still tickets. It's in Denver this year, the first weekend of September. I think the 5th, 6th, and 7th, or 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that. You can use the promo code EATON, EATON, and get 10% off a standard badge. I don't get paid for that. I don't get any commissions, nothing like that. But you can use that code and you can get a discount. And come and see me. I'll be there presenting a couple of sessions that haven't been announced yet. But I'm so excited. I'm really excited about them. And I can tell you there'll probably be a Daybell related one. Can't go into much more, but there'll be some discussion about Daybell. There'll be so many other people. I think they're going to be announcing the speakers in the coming weeks. So check it out. Eaton, EATON, is the standard promo code, or the promo code to get you 10% off a standard badge. Use that at checkout. You can learn more at CrimeCon's website. You can also follow me on social media. I'm all over the place. X, Twitter/X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, East Idaho News. All over the place. And yeah, I just want to thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with Courtroom Insider again on Wednesday night after Lori Vallow's hearing. We'll have the video on the East Idaho News YouTube channel on Wednesday morning as soon as that hearing's, as soon as we're allowed to show it to you, I should say. And I'm going to head back to Idaho Falls. More news to do in Idaho Falls. Thanks for watching Courtroom Insider. Have a good night.